On a rainy, cold evening, Sarah was in her small, dimly lit apartment, trying to distract herself from the gnawing worry that had plagued her for days. Her best friend, Claire, had vanished without a trace almost a week ago. Police had no leads, and her family was distraught, but Sarah held on to the hope that Claire would reach out. Then, late that night, a notification broke the silence. It was a voicemail from Claire. Trembling, Sarah pressed play, hoping for an explanation. But instead of Claire's familiar voice, there was a strange, distorted static, like the sound of wind passing through an empty tunnel. After a long, ominous pause, Claire's voice came through, faint and warped. "I'm lost. It's so dark. They're here with me." Her voice faded into static, replaced by a haunting silence. Sarah's heart raced. The message was chillingly cryptic, and worse, it felt wrong. Claire's voice was there, but distorted, almost as if it were coming from a place beyond this world. Frantically, she tried to call the number back, but the line was dead. Desperate for answers, Sarah dove into research, scouring the internet for anything that might explain the strange voicemail. After hours of searching, she stumbled upon a forum dedicated to supernatural experiences. People there shared similar stories, calls and messages from loved ones who had vanished or even died, each message bearing a haunting plea for help. One particular thread caught her attention. The users talked about something they called the Gateway, an old, abandoned phone booth in a remote, desolate area, known for supposedly connecting the living to the lost. Skeptics dismissed it as urban legend, but others claimed to have received calls and messages from those who had passed through it. Despite her fear, Sarah was determined. She posted her own experience, and soon, a user reached out with directions to the phone booth, warning her that not everyone who ventured there returned unchanged. Under the cover of night, Sarah embarked on her journey. The drive was long and silent, taking her through winding roads, dense forests, and narrow paths. With each mile, her fear grew, but her need for answers drove her onward. After what felt like an eternity, she reached a clearing. There, in the middle of nowhere, stood the phone booth. It was old, rusty, covered in vines, and shrouded in an unsettling silence. Approaching the booth, Sarah felt a chill crawl down her spine. The air felt thick, as if charged with an energy that didn't belong to this world. She hesitated, her hand trembling as she reached for the receiver. The phone was cold, almost unnaturally so, and when she lifted it, static filled the line. Suddenly, she heard Claire's voice, faint and muffled, as though calling from far away. "Sarah, don't let them find you." The line went silent for a moment, then erupted with voices, hundreds of them, overlapping, crying out, pleading for help, begging to be heard. Their words were fragmented, incoherent, yet each voice carried a weight of despair that made Sarah's skin crawl. Paralyzed with fear, Sarah clutched the receiver, unable to let go. She heard names, locations, cries for help, voices recounting their final moments, each one blending into the next. Among them, Claire's voice became clearer, pleading, "Please, Sarah, you have to listen. They're keeping us here. They don't let anyone leave." Desperation overtook her, and she demanded, "Claire, where are you? How do I get you out?" But before she could hear a response, the voices shifted, growing deeper, colder. A new voice emerged, chilling and malevolent, whispering, "You're not supposed to be here. You don't belong." Sarah felt a pull, as though an invisible hand was reaching through the receiver, gripping her, trying to draw her in. She struggled, her heartbeat pounding in her ears, but she couldn't drop the phone. The voice continued, "We wait for you. We're always waiting." And a chilling laugh echoed through the line. Gathering every ounce of strength, Sarah forced herself to release the receiver, dropping it as though it burned her. She stumbled back from the booth, gasping for air, her entire body trembling. But just as she turned to leave, the phone began to ring again, the shrill tones slicing through the silent night. She dared not answer, but the sounds seemed to grow louder, more insistent, as if demanding her return. Against her better judgment, Sarah turned back, but this time she saw something that froze her blood. Inside the booth, she could see faint outlines, shadowy figures pressed against the glass, faces twisted in agony, hands reaching out, mouths open in silent screams. Among them, she saw Claire, her face pale, eyes wide with terror. Claire's mouth moved, forming the words, "Run! Before it's too late!" With one last look, Sarah turned and ran, stumbling over rocks and branches, her mind racing, the echoes of the voices following her into the night. She didn't stop until she was far away, the ringing of the phone still echoing in her ears, as though it had seeped into her very soul. Back home, Sarah tried to forget what she'd seen, but the horrors of that night refused to fade. Days later, she received another voicemail from Claire, but she couldn't bring herself to listen. Every night since, her phone would ring at the same hour, the screen displaying Claire's name. She'd let it go to voicemail, but every message was the same: static, faint cries, and a single whispered warning. "They're waiting for you. We're always waiting." And so Sarah lives with the terror that one day she won't be able to resist answering, and that the voices from beyond will claim her too, just as they have so many others before her.